This happened in the early 90s when I was an X-ray technician at a large multi-campus hospital. I worked the evening shift and enjoyed it. I had some great coworkers, including one who was my best friend. One day I received a page for a phone call. When I answered, I said, "This is Luke." There was a slight pause, and then a female voice thanked me for my kindness the other night. I was taken aback but said, "Thank you," and asked who was speaking. After another pause, she said, "All in due time," and hung up. I had no idea who it was and thought my friend might be playing a prank. I didn't mention it to anyone, figuring the prankster would eventually slip up. I went home and forgot about it. A couple of days later, I received another page, and the same person asked if I was thinking about her. I said I wasn't and was too busy for games, then hung up. When I left work that night, I found a note on my truck saying I had made a huge mistake disrespecting her and would regret it. I threw the note away and went home. That night, around 2 a.m., my phone rang. The same voice told me I would get one more chance and then hung up. The next day, I confronted my friend, telling him the joke wasn't funny and to stop calling me. He insisted he didn't know what I was talking about. I told him everything and watched for any sign he was lying, but he seemed genuinely clueless. A few more days passed and I forgot about the incident. On my day off, I ran some errands and went to the mall. While eating at the food court, I noticed a woman staring at me. Feeling uneasy, I got up, threw away my food wrappers, and left. As I walked around, I realized she was following me. I wandered aimlessly until I ducked into a 2-story store and managed to lose her. I was shaken but had no idea who this woman was. That night, I couldn't sleep, thinking about her. Around 2 a.m., the phone rang, scaring me. I answered, telling her to stop bothering me or I'd go to the police. The call ended abruptly. An hour later, I heard something outside my house. I got up and looked out the doors and windows until I saw a shadow near my truck. I called 911 and a deputy sheriff arrived quickly. The woman was still there and was taken into custody. The deputy said she seemed to be on drugs and had a note about how disrespected I made her feel. She had a fixed blade knife but wouldn't say what she intended to do with it. They took her to the hospital for evaluation and advised me to get a restraining order. I never saw her again and have no idea what happened to her.
This took place back in the 1980s when I was a nurse at a mental hospital. I experienced many bizarre moments and met several patients who were not in their right minds, but nothing we couldn't manage. However, there was one patient, Jacob, who was exceptionally unhinged. He made Jack Nicholson's character in The Shining seem like Mary Poppins. Jacob had a twisted obsession with causing harm, which was extremely unsettling. I dreaded entering his room when it was my duty to assist him. One night, during my rounds, I noticed that all the lights were off except for a few, as patients needed their sleep. The hallway was nearly pitch black, and the only light source I had was my work pen with a built-in flashlight. As I approached Ward 13 to check on Jacob, I saw that his door was wide open. With my pen light, I glimpsed chaos inside, furniture overturned, sheets torn, and what appeared to be bloodstains on the walls. It looked like a storm of madness had passed through. Jacob was known to be dangerous, so we had restrained him with strong restraints on his arms and legs. Somehow he had managed to break free, which seemed nearly impossible. With a sense of foreboding, I cautiously moved towards the door leading to the downstairs storage area, a place restricted to staff. We had searched everywhere else, so he had to be there. Suddenly, I saw a figure dart behind some shelves. I braced myself for a potential attack from this lunatic. Carefully, I navigated through the narrow aisles, searching for Jacob. The area was pitch black and eerily silent, with my pen light as the only source of illumination. In the corner, I spotted Jacob crouched beside an old locker, holding a shiny scalpel and smiling. Frozen with fear, I watched as he stood up, the sickening smile still on his face. He began to walk towards me, scalpel in hand. He swung the scalpel, narrowly missing me. I dodged and fought back. In the midst of this struggle, another nurse rushed in with a syringe filled with strong medication. She managed to inject it into Jacob's back, sedating him. The medicine took effect almost immediately, and Jacob collapsed. Security arrived soon after and helped us restrain Jacob completely, ensuring he couldn't harm anyone else. Following this terrifying incident, the hospital decided to transfer Jacob to a different mental health facility that could provide more intensive care. They recognized the severity of his condition and wanted him to receive the specialized treatment he needed. Since then, I've never encountered a more deranged patient.
Let me tell you the bone-chilling story of my encounter with a super creepy patient in the hospital ward. I've always been drawn to the medical field because I've always excelled at caring for others. I'm a 23-year-old woman working night shifts at my local hospital. One night, I entered room 307, a single bedroom where Mr. Jacobson, an elderly patient in his late 80s, lay in bed. He was terminally ill and blind in both eyes. Mr. Jacobson was a wise person who was at peace with nearing the end of his life. We developed a friendly bond, although I tried not to get too attached to terminal patients for the sake of my mental health. As I approached his bedside, Mr. Jacobson turned his head towards me, his clouded eyes seemingly looking at me. His raspy voice broke the silence. "The nurse has arrived. I've been expecting you, my dear." I smiled and replied, "Good evening, Mr. Jacobson. How are you feeling today?" His chuckle was always comforting, reminding me that things would be okay in the grand scheme of life. "Oh, my dear, I'm but a mere vessel drifting between realms. Time doesn't hold much meaning for me now," he said. This was the strangest thing I'd ever heard him say. While I knew him to be poetic and deep, this was exceptionally strange behavior. I tried to decipher his words, but nothing made sense. Feeling confused and creeped out, I asked, "What do you mean, Mr. Jacobson?" "Like a butterfly, you will too awaken in my own time very soon, my love." Those words struck me hard. They were exactly what my late grandmother used to say, reminding me that change and growth come at their own pace. How did Mr. Jacobson know this? I began to tear up from the intense emotions. I was scared and confused, unable to hold back my curiosity. I asked with a trembling voice, "How did you know about that phrase?" "It's something only my grandmother used to say." Mr. Jacobson's tired eyes met mine, and a look of sadness crossed his face. "Some connections go beyond life," he said. We both cried together, holding on to that moment. I didn't fully understand what had happened, but it made me feel something profound. Mr. Jacobson's words about my grandmother were like a secret, something I couldn't explain but cherished deeply. As time passed, I kept those words close to my heart. They brought me comfort when I felt lost or unsure. I believe my grandmother's love extended beyond her passing, giving me strength and hope. Standing here today, I carry the wisdom of those connected voices. I embrace the mystery and the things I can't fully understand. Mr. Jacobson's encounter showed me that there are connections that transcend time and space, giving us a sense of purpose and guidance. So, I continue my journey with newfound strength and an open mind. The mysteries of life unfold before me like a butterfly emerging from its cocoon.
I was a typical 29-year-old woman, living my life and striving to make a difference as a nurse. Working at the hospital was both exciting and challenging. One day, a patient named Edward Dawson came in with a broken leg. From the moment I met him, something about him felt very off. His intense gaze made my skin crawl. Usually, we get some pretty strange patients, but Edward was different. The vibes he gave off were unsettling, and they made me very uncomfortable. He stayed in the hospital for a few days because he needed additional surgery on his leg. As time went on, he seemed to become strangely fixated on me. He would ask me questions that made me uneasy and even behave inappropriately, which got him reprimanded by other nursing staff. About a month after his release, I was relieved I never saw him again because he was the weirdest patient I had ever encountered in my years as a nurse. One day, as I was preparing medication at the nurse's station, I heard a whisper from my right side, "Beautiful eyes, Emily. You can see so much in them." I froze and turned, and there he was, Edward. I was shocked. I asked how he had become a nurse so quickly. "I finished nursing school," he said, "and I just so happened to get placed here. Crazy, right?" He laughed as if it was all a shared joke. From that moment on, Edward seemed to follow me everywhere. He would appear unexpectedly in corridors or outside the hospital, always watching me. He somehow got my phone number and started sending text messages filled with disturbingly intimate details about my personal life. I was terrified because I didn't know how he knew so much about me. I assumed a coworker was telling him everything, so I tried to brush it off. One evening, as I left the hospital after a long shift, I noticed a dark figure standing across the street. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was Edward. He stood there, watching me without moving. I quickened my pace, avoided eye contact, and got into my car. After this incident, the text messages from Edward became more frequent and more disturbing, referencing moments from my day, things he couldn't possibly know unless he was following me. It started to really scare me, and I didn't want to be alone at night. One night, I finally got a chance to relax and have fun with my friends. We went to a local hangout spot, laughing and enjoying each other's company. It was a much-needed break from the stress of work. As the night went on, my phone buzzed with a notification. I looked at it, and my heart sank. It was a message from my home security system's Ring camera, showing activity at my house. My friends noticed my change in expression and asked what was wrong. "Edward," I muttered, my voice trembling. My security camera caught him walking around my house in the middle of the night. My friends were also freaked out. "Emily, this is serious," Lisa exclaimed. "You have to call the cops now, and we should get somewhere safe." We left immediately and went to Lisa's house. She was the only one Edward had never talked to because she didn't work at the hospital. We got to her house and watched the Ring camera as we called the police. Edward was trying to break in. He tried everything, from lifting a window to climbing on my roof to trying to break down the door. The police told me they would prioritize our safety and arrived at Lisa's house quickly. They arrested Edward almost immediately when they got to my house. Weeks later, they started an investigation and found out he wasn't even a real nurse. He had been impersonating one and had worked there for weeks. I could barely sleep after realizing I had a stalker for months without knowing. All the information he had was from my medical records, which he had accessed secretly while at the hospital. Even now, I think about it from time to time, but I haven't heard anything about him since.